Hi and happy WNBA Finals. It is Jackie Powell of the 9 Basketball reporting live from Las Vegas following Game 1 of the WNBA Finals, where the Aces defeated the Mercury 89-86 in a game that went back and forth throughout. For each and every WNBA Finals game, I will be your guide here on the 9 Sports' YouTube channel, taking you through what the takeaways are from the finals, not only on the court, but off the court as well. And so today I am joined by our Las Vegas Aces beat reporter, Kelly Johnson, who has been following the Aces all season long. Kelly, welcome to our first episode in the series. It's great to have you here. So we have a lot to discuss. And so for organization's sake, we have 2 segments planned for you all. First, we have to discuss what was a fascinating State of the League presser from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, one that was probably the most tense of her 7 seasons as commissioner of the WNBA. I was telling Kelly off air that I've heard a lot of these press conferences, and I don't think I've experienced one where there was so much tension and buildup to a presser like this one. And then we're going to talk about sort of our takeaways and what we learned from her address and the Q&A that followed. And then in segment 2, Kelly and I are going to take you inside Game 1 of the finals here from Michelob ULTRA Arena, the game itself. What did we see and what did we learn from the press conferences that followed? Well, okay, that is our show. Let's rock. Let's get into it. So, Kelly, I think where I want to start is, what immediately did you take away from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert's State of the League address? But also, before we get into that question, if you could just remind our audience about why there was so much tension. Why was there so much buildup going into this State of the League presser?
So, like she said, there's a lot of tension going into it, coming off of the comments from Napheesa Collier from the Minnesota Lynx in her exit interviews, saying that they've met up. She has said some very not so nice things, in that basically saying that the WNBA has the worst leadership in the world. They have the best fans, the best players, the worst leadership. And Cheryl Reeve was recently fined $15,000 for criticizing officiating. Steph White and Becky Hammon were also fined $1,000 each for agreeing with her. I know even Becky made a joke about it in one of the post-game press conferences saying, "Oh, did you see my sign? It said freedom of speech isn't free." She also, in this pre-game press conference, was asked about officiating, and she said, "I'm not going to talk about it. I already paid my fines." So it's been a pretty crazy week.
Yes, it's been a pretty crazy week it's felt like it's been 3 weeks, to be quite honest.
10 years.
And so there was, as Kelly accurately explained, there was a lot going into this. Obviously, Cathy Engelbert made a statement reacting to Napheesa Collier's prepared speech, the 4-minute-long prepared speech. And so this was the first time that she was really going to address it in person rather than a pre-made speech that was sent out to media members. And so that's the context. And so I'll get back to it, Kelly. So what really was your first takeaway? What really stood out to you? I mean, I believe Cathy Engelbert spoke to us for maybe 25, 30 minutes.
The biggest thing that I noticed, she was asked twice about the comments made. One that really stood out to me was the comment that Napheesa Collier made saying that Cathy told her that Caitlin Clark should be grateful she's making $16 million off the court because of the WNBA's exposure. And She denied it. She said that it was inaccurate reporting when it came from Napheesa Collier's mouth.
So why don't we play for our listeners exactly what Kelly is describing here? Because I think you want to hear the exchange. It's really fascinating. So we're going to play that for you.
Hi, Cathy. Annie Costable, Front Office Sports. You've continued to express that you're disheartened by the characterization of your conversation with Napheesa Collier. Just again, seeking clarity. Did you in fact say that Caitlin Clark should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything? And do you actually feel that way, that without this platform, players like Caitlin Clark wouldn't be making what they do off the court?
Yeah, obviously, I did not make those comments. Caitlin has been a transformational player in this league. She's been a great representative of the game. She's brought in tens of millions of new fans to the game. Proud of what she's put on the court. Unfortunately, the injuries held her back from a full season this year. But again, I'm not going to get into every point, counterpoint. It's not productive here. We're here to celebrate the WNBA Finals. I think what Indiana just did was amazing with all the injuries they had. And the everything they faced this year, bringing that to a Game 5 in overtime. But yeah, as I said, there's a lot of inaccuracies reported out there, and I certainly did not say that.
So that was the exchange. The question was asked by Front Office Sports' Annie Costable. She's a friend of our newsroom and of this podcast, or of this podcast series. And so that really stands out, because she, in her statement that came out the day Napheesa Collier's speech was delivered, she did not deny anything. But here she did. I know there's another clip of another exchange that also stood out to you. And it was from Malika Andrews, who asked the question. So I'm going to play that too. And then we'll sort of talk about what these two answers mean, why they stood out, and how this story is carried forward. So stay with us here.
Hi, Cathy. Malika Andrews, ESPN. I just wanted to get some clarity on some of the specifics that Napheesa Collier said about your conversation that you had that was previously private. Did you in fact say that, quote, players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the rights deal that I got them?
There's a lot of inaccuracy out there through social media and all this reporting. And so I think what's most helpful is to focus on, I have been in touch with Napheesa. We've exchanged texts. We're talking next week. So I think, obviously, a lot of reporting, a lot of inaccuracy about what I said or what I didn't say. And I will tell you, I highly respect the players. There's a lot of emotion and passion going on right now because we're in collective bargaining. We're in the WNBA Finals. And so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. I'm a human too. I have a family. I have two kids who are devastated by these comments. And so all I'll say is just, it's obviously been a tough week. And I just think there's a lot of inaccuracy out there.
I absolutely respect that.
So those were two clips of Engelbert being asked specifically about the conversations that Napheesa Collier revealed to us in her speech. So Kelly, I guess why did those 2 points stand out to you? And sort of what do those 2 points mean as this story continues moving forward?
Now, first of all, I know how you said she didn't deny it at first. And the fact that she didn't deny it does say a lot of words. She says a lot of words. It says a lot about who she is as a character, as a person. But the fact that she came into this press conference, she knew she was going to be asked about it. saying that it was inaccurate reporting when it came from Nafisa Collier's mouth in her speech. That doesn't sit right with me, because it's not the media necessarily reporting that, the media was in this conversation. It was a conversation that Nafisa Collier told everyone that this is what she said and that she needs to be held accountable for it. Now, I think the part at the end where she said, I'm a mother, I have 2 kids, and they're both being affected by it, that does kind of humanize her a little bit. Everyone, when they talk about Nafisa Collier, the first thing they talk about is, oh, she's a mom, she's a mom. We saw it when Minnesota played Phoenix and Alyssa Thomas took her out. A lot of people were calling Alyssa Thomas dirty and saying that Nafisa Collier's mother, she shouldn't have been hit like that. And that's like her main image, is that she's a mom. So I think her saying that she's a mom as well, that puts things into another light.
It does. It does. I mean, I think there's a long rabbit hole that we could go down about how Cathy Engelbert is expected to look by society, because she has been a CEO in business for over 20 years, almost, I think she said over 30 years, a long time. And so the stereotypes that are, and the different qualitative expectations that are expected of her as a woman in that position, it's complicated. It's very complicated. But going back to the clips we played, essentially Cathy Engelbert is insinuating that part of what Nafisa Collier said was either a lie or hearsay. She didn't full out say that, but that's sort of the assumption. Engelbert also could have been referring to the Sports Business Journal report, which that was reporting, which said that, Engelbert won't be in this job for that long and that she will step down after the CBA is completed. And so there was an answer during the presser where she completely responded to that reporting, not necessarily Nafisa Collier's speech and storytelling. Those are 2 different things that I think during this press conference she conflated. And so just to recap what that was like when she was more calling out the Sports Business Journal report, she really talked about how, she said, I've never been a quitter. I'm entering my 40th year, actually this month, in business, never been a quitter. And so I also just thought what really stood out to me was the accountability piece. And so, Kelly, there was some news that came out of her initial address. So if you could just sort of remind or share with our listeners what that news was and how that dovetails into this accountability piece, this new side to Cathy Engelbert that we haven't really seen before.
She mentioned that there's going to be a new sort of state of the game committee, which is a multi-stakeholder task force, which will include players, owners, investors, all different parts of stakeholders that can improve officiating, improving the growth of the league, and just improving the league overall. Because officiating has been the number one issue this year. Like I said earlier, Cheryl Reeve getting fined $15,000 for criticizing the officiating, and then Becky Hammond and Steph White both getting fined for agreeing. But so many players and so many coaches this season have complained about the officiating. And you can't just say, oh, it's one team complaining. It's the entire league. And she also said that the league is not where it should be in a sense of agreement. It is very one-side heavy. And she's taking accountability for that by creating this task force so that all parties, their voices are heard when it comes to officiating the league in general and the state of the league.
And I think this was a pretty direct response to Napheesa Collier's point, which is she spoke about how the league wasn't admitting that there is a problem. And it was pretty clear that Cathy Engelbert admitted to the problem. She admitted to it. She said that the officiating of this league has not evolved with the game, which that has been a common thread that I have heard from executives around the league saying that this sport has really changed. Players are playing faster, they're more athletic. And so as a result, the officiating has to change with how the game is changing. And so she admitted to there being a problem, just like she admitted to there being an issue with injuries in this league. Our Lucas Seehofer, if some of you do not know, he has the WNBA injury database, which this has been the third season he's been running it. And I asked Cathy Engelbert, with the data that Lucas has collected and with other internal data that was shared with Bloomberg, injuries clearly dramatically increased this season. And so instead of her just denying it and saying, oh, injuries are a part of sport, they're a part of the game, which that was how she would respond to the question of injuries in the past. But now she's much more defiant. And she said, we understand how much of a problem this is. It was interesting to sort of hear her connect the officiating to injuries as well. I mean, I don't think that is the full cause of it. I think the season footprint is another. I mean, we could have had this press conference with her for another 20 minutes at least, because I had season footprint questions. But then again, a CBA has to be ratified. That's sort of what this whole discussion came from, which is there's been a lot of tension between the commissioner and the league office and the Players Association as the league comes up on this October 31st deadline. And so, again, going back to this theme of accountability, there was a human part of this, not just where she was talking about the task force or about officiating or injuries. Kelly, what was that moment where she got a little bit more vulnerable?
So this was right at the beginning of the press conference when she started diving into the comments that Collier made. She said, I was disheartened to hear that some players feel the league and me personally do not care about them or listen to them. And if the players in the W don't feel appreciated and valued by the league, then we have to do better and I have to do better. And that's not something you hear from a lot of commissioners. I know in certain leagues, I've not heard any commissioner say I have to do better for my players. This is a big step. And I think this is going to be a huge turning point. And also her mentioning her family, that was also a big turning point because not many people know that she has a family. Not many people know that she's a mom. And, I think it was a really big wake-up call to her that she has to not only be better for the league, but she has to be better for her public image so that her family doesn't get affected by it. Her friends don't get affected by it, because that is a very real thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just about her being a mother. It's about her being a human. And I think that's something that has been missed from her public image and her public persona. Cathy Engelbert is, she can have some awkward moments. And that's very human. And I felt like for the first time, covering her and listening to her speak, this was the first time that we could really feel some humanity from her. We could feel some emotion. She wasn't just talking about corporate touch points. She wasn't just rattling off statistics. She was emotionally engaged with the members of the media she was trying to talk to. And today was really about her taking a step to prove to people that she is willing to change. She is willing to admit her own mistakes. She's willing to hold herself accountable. And this is something you don't just see in professional sports, you see it in politics too, with politicians who, if they make a mistake or if a negative story comes out about them, they deny, they don't admit, they don't hold themselves accountable, they don't say, that's on me, I need to be better. And so it was a huge step for her to admit that she has a lot of room to grow, you know, and that really begins with moving forward into these CBA negotiations. And she was asked about if she believes the league will reach the deadline. She was a bit wishy-washy about it. She sort of said, we're going to try, we're going to be working around the clock, but we do know that if we do need more time, we will have it. And so, you know, this, I believe tonight's State of the League presser is another turning point. Just like Nafisa Collier's 4-minute speech was a turning point as well. Coming up, we are going to talk about what we saw on the court. So hold on, stay with us. We will be right back. And welcome back. Here is Jackie Powell alongside Kelly Johnson. And we just spent segment 1 really going deep into what we learned from the Cathy Engelbert State of the League press conference. And so now we talked a lot about what went on off the court when it came to game 1 of the finals. Now we're going to talk about what went on the court. And so, okay, Kelly, I want to ask you, what really stood out to you about game 1? What were sort of the sights and sounds? What were you noticing in the arena during this back and forth battle between these two teams?
Well, the number one thing that stood out to probably a lot of people was that the bench was the most important part of this win. Dana Evans, 21 points, 4 steals, first player in finals history to reach 4 steals. No fouls as well.
4 steals and 5 3-pointers. That was the stat,
Yeah.
right?
4 steals, 5 3-pointers, making 5 out of 6 too. Incredibly accurate. We also had Jewell Loyd with 18 points. She had 2 3-pointers out of 7 attempts, but still, 18 points is 18 points. Megan Gustafson came off the bench with 2 points and no fouls, which, no disrespect to Megan Gustafson, but she usually gets at least 1 foul or 2 per game, so 0 fouls. Great job. A'ja Wilson had no fouls as well. I think foul trouble was what sent them into game 5 in the semifinals against Indiana. I think Indiana had 24 free throw attempts and Vegas only had 11. So they worked on their fouls. They only had 12 called on them, while Phoenix had 17. Some may think it's a bias call, but it could also be that they worked on cleaning up their fouls.
Yeah, we don't know. That's sort of, it's not really a black and white type of answer. I think you can take a look and say, okay, there was a disparity, but it wasn't the dramatic disparity that you saw in the Fever series, or there was a lot of, in the Mercury series against the Lynx, when Nafisa Collier did not get to the line once. That's not really what we saw in this game 1. What's so interesting about your focus on the bench is Since many of you know, I covered the New York Liberty at the 9 basketball, and since I covered the Liberty, I've watched many Las Vegas Aces teams over the years. And so something quite common about these teams is they lacked a really reliable bench. They were very top heavy. That was always a weakness that would be pointed out by media members. And so it's really wild to me that the Aces win this game because of their bench, not because they don't have one, but that their bench performed better than the Mercury's bench. And so it's incredibly fascinating. And in talking about Dana Evans and her breakout, you know, a lot of people were talking about Chelsea Gray being the X factor of this series. I thought about it, and in a story at NBC Sports, I wrote about how I thought Dana Evans was going to be the X factor, just because she is faster than anyone on the Mercury, and she can really get paint touches, which creates, when you can get into the paint with the ball, that creates so much. There's this talk about paint to great, drive and kick. That's what Dana Evans can do better than almost anyone. And so it did not surprise me that she had the game that she did. So, but Kelly, what also stood out to you, I guess, when it came to Jewell and just sort of, you know, to me, it looked like she was playing within herself, not trying to do too much. What did you see from her?
She wasn't trying to put the team on her back. And I think at the beginning of the season, when she was in the starting role, she wanted to try to put the team on her back when she was playing with Asia, playing with Jackie, playing with Chelsea, like for long periods of time. But since the switch, since she came off the bench, she's improved. Her shooting has improved. She's become a little more relaxed in her shooting, and that is going to be a key going into this series. Same thing with Asia. Asia wasn't trying to put the team on her back. Was she scoring? Yes, she had 21 points tonight, but it wasn't, just pass the ball to Asia, pass the ball to Asia. Asia had 5 assists tonight too.
That was huge. That was absolutely huge. And that's going to be something that we're going to look to ask Asia tomorrow. How has her playmaking improved? What is it about how she trusts her teammates? Where in a really tight, high-pressure situation, she is okay with trying to get the best look. And she is able to pass the ball out and trust someone else to get it done. And that is something we did not see a lot during her Herculean 2024 MVP season last year. And so that really stood out to me. And going back to Jewell, it sort of reminded me of how she played in Seattle when Brianna Stewart and Sue Bird were her teammates. She knew exactly what her role was. She didn't try to carry the team, play outside of herself, do too much. She seemed to have a trust. And it was interesting. I think Becky Hammond said in the postgame that she gave an instruction to both Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray, the team's primary ball handlers. And she said, let's try to get Jewell and Dana going early. And they did. We saw that. It was pretty apparent early on, and it carried through a lot of the game. So let's talk about Phoenix, because there were some interesting things that we noticed. So what stood out to you in the beginning from the Mercury?
So starting out, Ka was really hot,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they said she had 19 points by the end of the first half.
Yep.
And then the second half, she only ended the game with 21.
Mm-hmm.
And they had 14 3-pointers compared to the Aces 9, and they still didn't win the game. Usually with 14 3-pointers, you would win. However, there was a moment where there should have been a timeout called from Phoenix with 6 seconds left to sort of reset, readjust. If they would have hit a 3, they would have tied it, sent the game into overtime. He didn't call the timeout. And he did mention that. He said, maybe I should have, maybe I shouldn't have. So that timeout at 6 seconds, that could have been really critical. Also noticed that towards the second half, when they started missing shots, the Aces started kind of putting them in tough positions. They started getting really frustrated. And that led to a technical on Satou Sabally, which was a key point.
Let's play a clip of that, actually, because I think it's worth sort of seeing the whole sequence, because you can take sort of a look at the body language that exists here. So if you take
as well. And there's been a few times throughout this second half where it seems like Satou has had a little difficulty gathering herself emotionally. She's had some teammates talk to her, and here it costs her team.
Great pass by Chelsea Gray into Asia Wilson. Foul gets called. There was some contact there of throwing the ball.
And you can see Alyssa Thomas looking at her saying, come on, Sabally. And then
So you could hear Ryan Ruocco sort of say, that Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner were really reactive after what happened. And so you could see from that clip, essentially, Asia got a really good look, I think, on a pick and roll, and, just a really good look at the basket. Satou tries to defend it. She's not really straight up. She fouls. I think it was a pretty clear call from what you saw. And then Satou was frustrated with herself, and she slammed the ball down really hard with the officials looking, and they gave her a technical also. And so you saw AT and DB, they were like, why did you do that? And so that stood out to both of us, because the Mercury are a team that really haven't been through these types of situations together. The narrative about them is that they get along, they like each other so much, they've been really united, but we haven't seen any of those contentious types of moments. And so that was a time where it was like, okay, they're going to war together and they're trying to figure this out. It was really interesting to sort of see Alyssa Thomas's leadership in a moment like that, sort of how she reacts to when a teammate does something that maybe isn't the best in that moment. So what was interesting, so that obviously was a momentum changer for the Aces. And also there was another momentum changer for the Aces too.
There was a big momentum changer that sort of slowed Phoenix down. Sammy Whitcomb, Alyssa Smith was fouled, and as she was falling down, because she was falling horizontally, she fell, and I guess she landed on Whitcomb's knee. And she went to the locker room. She wasn't walking on her right foot. Couldn't put any weight on it.
She was jumping. Yeah, I remember seeing her hop. She was hopping around.
And went to the locker room. And then not that much longer later, she came back out on the court, but she was barely putting any weight on that foot. She was mainly using the foot that wasn't hurt. And she wasn't really making any shots. She was trying to handle the ball. She had to pass right away. And that, I feel so bad for Sammy. I hope she's okay. I wish her the best. But that was definitely a big momentum changer, because you have one of your key bench players who isn't playing right. If she doesn't play next game, we could see Lexi held take her place.
And more minutes from Monique Makani. And so what's really vital about the role that Sammy Whitcomb plays on this team is she really helps Alyssa Thomas set up that inverted pick and roll. So Sammy Whitcomb is screening for Alyssa Thomas. And so, sometimes you see that with Monica Makani, but it's at its most effective when it is Sammy Whitcomb screening and popping, or that's sort of where I've seen it be most effective. And so you're missing that. You're missing Whitcomb's spacing, shooting gravity, her, decision making if she doesn't play. It was interesting because when she first came out on the floor, she did make her first shot. And so I just wonder, okay, was she sort of going on adrenaline? And then when she sort of settled into it, that pain wasn't going away. But that was a really sad moment, and some uncertainty for Phoenix moving forward. So during the post-game press conference, we heard from Satou Sabally and Kahleah Copper, and sort of what I got from it was Kahleah Copper wasn't worried. She was pissed off, but she was sort of like, my confidence in this group is not faltering. She feels confident about game 2, but at the same time, she was annoyed. I mean, she was asked a question about Alyssa Thomas missing those 2 free throws. She didn't really want to engage. And then...
That's valid. I wouldn't want to engage in a question like that either, not going to lie.
And then what did you feel like was Satou's aura, or sort of what she was sort of expressing about her evening amid the technical and all of sort of what went on for her?
She seemed really pissed off. And granted, I would too if I were in a situation like that. When she was asked about what do they need to improve for the next game, she just said our defense needs to get better. And she's still a young player. This is her first time in the playoffs, or this far in the playoffs.
Yes.
And, with finals, the pressure's more intense. And the Aces have been under this pressure before. Critical players on the bench have been in this position before. Kia Stokes, Megan Gustafson, Dana Evans, Jewell Loyd. They've all experienced this kind of pressure before in a final. It's something that Satou hasn't. And sometimes that pressure can get to you. Hopefully she has a nice, relaxing evening. And then nice, relaxing evening tomorrow night after practice to really wind in and focus. And if Phoenix could come out swinging in game 2, if everyone's locked in, everyone's focused. I do want to mention the leadership difference between Alyssa Thomas and Asia. In that clip, Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner looked at Satou like, are you kidding me? Why did you do that? Kind of like a mother scolding a child in the store. I know it's oddly specific, but I've seen it. We've all seen it. But there was a point where Alyssa Smith was up for 2 free throws. She missed the first one. She was getting frustrated. And Asia went up to her and was like, hey, just calm down, lock in, focus. If you miss it, you miss it. If you make it, you make it. Relax. It's not the end of the world. We'll figure out ways to score. And you could really tell that helped Alyssa in that heat of the moment.
Because she was productive after that.
Yeah,
that didn't defeat her and the rest of her evening.
Yeah,
she still found a way to get to the line, get on the glass. I mean, I think that's a fascinating point. I mean, she missed 4 free throws in a row. And Asia's leadership was more, it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put too much pressure on yourself.
I feel like if you get hard on yourself, that really takes a negative effect on your game. I know in certain situations I've been I've been super hard on myself, and
It's natural.
yeah, it starts to mess you up. And I think other people being hard on you, that could start like a spiral. And that's what I think we saw tonight with Phoenix.
For sure. That makes a ton of sense. Well, that is it for us. I will see you all on Sunday after Game 2. Will the Aces jump out to a 2-0 lead, or will the Mercury pick up their defense and even the series at 1 apiece before the finals head to Phoenix for Game 3? We will have to see. This has been Jackie Powell and
Kelly Johnson.
And we are signing off, and thank you for tuning in to your first WNBA Finals report.